Hey everyone, I'm Greg Magershak,
Hi all, it's Norman Chen.
and this is REKT Podcast.
Hello and welcome, everybody. As you may or may not know, I'm not Bunchu. I am joined by myself, Chamber. For those of you listening, obviously we're used to hearing Bunchu off the top. He is in the midst of moving to New Jersey in his Tony Soprano-esque house as we speak. So he will be with us next week. For our shows back to normal. He let me take control. I don't know what's going to happen. This might get a little crazy. We might, take our shirts off, see what happens. But I am joined by we have the sponsors of the show we have Greg and Norman from Intercoin, and I'm very excited to talk to these guys today. We've been chatting a little bit before the show. They seem like real nice gents, and I'm glad to have them on the show. Welcome, Greg and Norman. Greg, how are you doing today?
Awesome to be on here.
It is a beautiful day. I think we're in the dog days of summer, to be honest. I see the leaves falling. Sweater vests are coming out. Hoodies are coming out. Layers are being thrown on. But how's Norman doing today?
I'm doing great. It's a pleasure to be with you all and tell you all a little bit about Intercoin.
Yeah, we're pretty excited. Obviously, we've I'd say in the last what are we going to call it? Maybe month or so, there's been a pretty big resurgence in the hype factor when it comes to cryptocurrency. Obviously, myself, I've been in this area, this arena for a few years now. But I would say as of late, there seems to be a little bit more of a buzz going on. Are you guys seeing that same thing too?
Absolutely. Especially around the DeFi sector, with all the pace of innovation we're seeing is really just breakneck. I think we're seeing the traditional financial system being completely reinvented piece by piece. And every day there's just a new project coming out. So yes, it is very exciting, and I am seeing that. Good reason.
It sure is. I was trying to explain, my wife she's aware, I would say, of cryptocurrency. She is not in crypto by any means. I think I sent her a few Ethereum a few years ago, and she'll kind of monitor that. And then on her phone, she'll be able to see whether things are going well or things are going not so well. But, I earlier, or what day is it today? Wednesday? I think it was maybe over the weekend. I was kind of explaining to her a certain project that we were looking at, and she basically saw the life cycle of it go from, super hype mode to, kind of back burner, kind of old news within the span of 3 days. And she's like, it's already done. I said, it's done for now. And I said, this is kind of what's happening as of late. Like you had mentioned, DeFi stuff is really popping off. NFT right now seems to be the new thing. So yeah, it is pretty exciting. I haven't seen this much excitement in the space for a little while. I would say for sure. Greg, what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I think a lot of it is, I'm excited to see sort of the effect of technology on society. I love to have these broader narratives about how, people change, society changes, and we're so different than the way our parents thought and our grandparents thought. So you see these waves, I remember, I was growing up, the internet, really people started using computers more. Before I thought computers were more for, just for geeks and for playing video games, and doing homework. But then when the internet came out, people started hanging out on these social platforms, and then Facebook came out. The original, the original generation was MySpace and Friendster, right? They were the first ones.
Those are the OGs, yeah.
They were exactly. In a way, I kind of feel like Bitcoin and Ethereum are like that. I feel that they're the pioneers, that came out 10 years ago. And there's something coming down the pike that's like different, and there's so many projects coming up. But I love the space. And the thing is, society very much gets affected by these things. So, for example, look at how notifications and phones and Steve Jobs' iPhone affected people, right? Everyone's got one. They're kind of glued to it. And they're almost like, if I told people in the 90s that they're going to be glued to their phones, right? They would look at me funny. They'd be like, what are you talking about? A phone all the time? But,
right.
You know, that
100%. It's so strange. It's such a strange thing. And then the opposite occurs. I don't know if you guys have kids. I have a 7-year-old, and she doesn't have a phone yet, but she's got her iPad. She sees us on our phone all the time. She sees us on our iPad all the time. To be frank, she's probably on her iPad a little too much. And I explained to her that, like, yeah, when I was your age, there was no phone. Like, I sound like an old man. Like, oh, I used to go play outside and hang out with my friends until the streetlights came on, kind of thing. And it's just a different thing. I would say, I guess when I was her age, I was, I guess, addicted to my Nintendo as well. So it's just, I think at the time you're just addicted to different things. But yeah, in her mind, imagine not having an iPad to watch, her YouTube shows or play video games on it. It doesn't compute at all. But when I first got into crypto, I think one of the big
I find it fascinating. Like, it's hard to imagine being without your electronics, and yet we were, a lot of us.
Absolutely.
I just turned 37, and like throughout most of human history, people did stuff. I see that like people used to use all kinds of flowery English and really witty turns of phrase in the 19th century, because I feel like that's what they had. They had pianos and they had English.
You make do with what you got.
Now everyone's using emojis and LOL.
You're 100% right. You're 100% right. Now, when I first got into crypto, I think we were talking a little earlier about, just how it's changing everything. And one of the biggest things I really appreciate, obviously, there's that, the digital dollar, the ability to transact worldwide without, third parties, that kind of thing. But voting was always kind of a big thing for me. I just like the idea of using a blockchain to vote, whether that's, for political office, for even just for, company decisions or what have you. I like the idea of voting on the blockchain. Have you guys kind of delved into that a little bit as well?
Oh, absolutely. So just to kind of lay out the mission of the company, Intercoin is aiming to bring crypto to the mainstream. We feel that, crypto's been around since before Bitcoin. But the thing is, cryptography, back then it meant cryptography, not cryptocurrency.
Right.
It was a really useful tool. It was used to secure your communication, but also to sign things, which will become important again when there's deep fakes and you need to sign your video that's really yours and not, a deep fake.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to become important again. But yeah, crypto plays a really important role in securing communication. Again, just talking about history a little bit, PGP and that guy, Phil Zimmerman, back then the government said that strong crypto was like munitions and they regulated it. Well, the guy printed it in a book and used the free speech to export his PGP code. This is to secure email. My point is, crypto has been around since a long time, but there's still a huge problem, and that is crypto's not being used in the mainstream. What I mean by that is, like, look around. How many people are actually using Bitcoin to pay their barber or pay a restaurant or pay anything, right?
Right.
And sort of been this thing that can only handle a few transactions per second. And Ethereum similarly is now always trying to move to Ethereum 2.0 because they've kind of painted themselves into a corner with the blockchain. When I think of a blockchain, we all think of like a bunch of transactions that's linearly ordered, right? Only one can happen at a time, right? And they go into these blocks. And basically, that kind of consensus about what order the transactions are in is a very expensive process. And so I think voting will happen, and it will happen with crypto. But I, right at the outset, want to make that distinction between crypto and blockchain. And I'm not saying cryptocurrency. I'm simply saying cryptography can be used to like authenticate things and make sure that results are correct and very hard to forge, right? But on the other hand, a blockchain is just one type of data structure. There's also Merkle trees and so on. So we actually wrote, if you look at CoinDesk, back in March, I personally wrote an article on how we're going to do voting on the blockchain. But it won't be the blockchain really. I know they put that in the title, blockchain voting, but really it will be a more general data structure called a Merkle tree. So things can happen at the same time rather than one at a time. And that's really important because the current state of DeFi and everything is that everything happens like one at a time. And that's just not a scalable way to do finance throughout the world. So that
can you elaborate a little bit more on the Merkle tree? And like, if are there any other projects that kind of utilize that same technique?
Absolutely. Merkle tree has been around since a long time. Ralph Merkle came up with it, I think, decades ago. A Merkle tree is basically where you have a bunch of things like, let's say, a file. Here's a good way to think of it. Let's say you've got a file that's in front of you, and you decide, okay, I'm going to break this file into like a tree of sub-files, and then those sub-files are broken down further, right, into little chunks. A Merkle tree basically takes a hash of all those little chunks, they're called leaves of the tree, and then at every level, it takes a hash again and again, right, until it gets to the root. So if you have that root hash, the idea is you could only have obtained it if you had access to all the actual leaves of the tree. So, and in fact, a network that predates Bitcoin, like BitTorrent, uses Merkle trees to basically say, look, I'm going to pull some of the chunks of this file from here, and at the same time stream some chunks from here, another server, and it pulls all of them, and it knows that each chunk belongs to the file because of crypto, because there's a Merkle branch going from that Merkle leaf to the Merkle root. And all you need is that branch, and then it says, oh, this leaf belongs to the tree. So essentially, you can store chunks of a file dispersed throughout the internet redundantly, and it can just go and get them all, and you have integrity ensured by cryptography. So that's the kind of stuff that can be used for votes. If someone's voting on a local level, and then you aggregate the local votes, right? Then you can aggregate the local precincts, right, into like a state, and then you can aggregate the states into this, and you've got this whole tree. So anyone who's actually got their vote, it's kind of like has a leaf in that Merkle tree, can go ahead and make sure that their vote has been included in the total. You see, so that's an important property of a voting system.
That is very interesting. So obviously, with Intercoin, that's going to be one portion of it. But it seems like I would say that what the main focus is utilizing a digital currency on a day-to-day basis. Do I have that about right?
That's exactly right. So today, let me just illustrate, for example, look at Ethereum, right? Ethereum has had a huge boom in 2017, 16, and 17, right, with the ICO market. Yeah. So many people have invested money into these tokens, but you would think now that all of this has been invested, they should be using them, right? They should be using Filecoin and all these other things. The thing is that it's very hard to gain mainstream adoption if you can only handle 20 transactions per second in the entire world. So as more people try to use this thing, like they are now with the DeFi boom, transactions can go up to $20, we've seen. Sometimes $99 per transaction.
Yeah. I've been a victim of that lately, I'm going to be honest.
So you got these weird sort of anomalies where, first of all, there's this bottleneck that's inherent in every global consensus mechanism. Whichever way it shakes out, there's always this thing. So in Bitcoin and Ethereum, it's called the miner. The miner is a computer that basically takes a bunch of transactions and then puts them in a block and tries to secure that block by finding a certain hash, right? So that miner, if you think about it, is a huge block. It's a huge block. We often joke that the blockchain is blocked by the blocks. But it's true. And in other words, each transaction, it's almost like the idea is, right, that each transaction has to happen in isolation on its own. And then you've got this weird thing now with the flash loans. Like, have you heard of the flash loan?
I have.
It's incredible. It's for the first time, because everything happens one at a time, there's sort of this idea that you can lend money absolutely without risk, except maybe the blockchain gets forked. Right. That's another interesting thing. But anyway, these flash loans can literally concentrate millions of dollars in one block. They lend it out. And the idea is, of course, nothing else is running. Your transaction's all by itself. Nothing else in the world is running on this world computer at the time. So you can literally roll back the entire transaction if you don't get your money back. And so people can go ahead and borrow millions of dollars with no collateral. They can just come out of the blue, anonymously borrow it, and then they can direct these massive amounts of money at a certain DeFi protocol, and that could actually be very dangerous. So each protocol now is exposed 100% to these kinds of attacks. And that's the consequence of having everything synchronously happen one after the other versus like happening in parallel like every other protocol on the internet. So that's an example of consequences of design decisions that original people have made.
That's very interesting. Norman, I have a question for you.
Sure. Shoot.
All right. So I'm looking at some of the features for Intercoin. Obviously, we've been looking at this, and I was maybe wondering if you can help me understand, some of how you guys can get to some of the features. So obviously, I'm on the website currently, and you guys are showing, Bitcoin transaction per second, Ethereum transactions per second, and then Intercoin. Now, we say here practically unlimited when it comes to transactions per second. How do we achieve that level of speed in processing those transactions?
Sure. So Greg touched a little bit upon it already earlier, but I can give you a rough overview as well. So the idea is pretty much we don't do global consensus in Intercoin, right? Which is to say, in existing like proof of work blockchains like Bitcoin, whenever someone makes a transaction, let's say you're buying a coffee in New York, and someone buys a coffee in China, right? All of these like transactions are put onto like a single ledger, right? And that's one of the big reasons why the transaction speeds for Bitcoin is like capped. And whenever there's like a lot of transactions, like people have to like wait in line pretty much for the transactions to go through. Right now on Intercoin, what's happening is we don't do that. There's no global consensus. And instead we opt for like local consensus. And the idea is that, let's say you're in New York, right? And you have a transaction. That transaction only goes onto the New York ledger, and you only share it with like people in your community. And the idea is that for the rare case that someone in New York needs to do like a cross border with someone in China, right? Those transactions like don't happen like that often. And that's how we're able to like scale these speeds up to like a practically unlimited speed. But I do want to get Greg to have some input on this as well too.
So I have a follow-up question. Maybe Greg can answer it.
Sure.
The listeners know I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed. But how you had mentioned obviously a transaction in China versus somebody buying a cup of coffee in China versus somebody buying a cup of coffee in New York. Realistically, that should not be on the same ledger, but it is when it comes to Bitcoin, when it comes to Ethereum, that kind of thing. How are you able to regionalize those transactions? Obviously, like in my head, I'm like, well, if I just have a digital wallet, that in my mind, well, no one should know where I am in the world. Is that based on IP addresses during the transaction? How are we getting that regional? You know what I mean?
So that is the 1,000 Bitcoin question, right? Basically, you want something to be as secure as Bitcoin and Ethereum. Security is very important, but at the same time, you want it to be scalable. You want it to be able to scale without limits. And first of all, I want to explain that this is actually the norm on the internet. I'll tell you 2 words: embarrassingly parallel. If you Google that, embarrassingly parallel, you'll find Wikipedia articles. It basically means that the system is parallel without having to actually do anything. That's almost the default state of it. And in fact, most protocols on the internet, like HTTP for the powers the web, and SMTP powers email, right? No one has. I don't think I've ever heard anybody ask, well, what is the limit per second that the internet, like how many emails per second can be sent, right? Or how many websites? And the reason is, of course, that if you add more computers, servers, and clients to the network, then you can send more emails. And why? Because they can all work at the same time. Someone in China could be sending an email to someone locally, while someone in New York could be serving a website or sending an email, right? We don't think of a bottleneck. So why is there a bottleneck in crypto? Well, there's this concept called a double spend problem, right? The idea is that what if I go ahead and send money to someone in China, but also the same coin I'll send to someone in Italy, right? Are they going to be able to compare notes in time, right? So to solve this problem, and I'm writing an article on this, by the way, it's going to come out soon. Love, just to tell all the listeners to look out on intercoin.org. You can see these and join our community. So basically, we discuss these kinds of things. We attracted a lot of technologists, economists, and former regulators to talk about the different aspects of bringing crypto to the mainstream. And so one of the things is, how do you scale? Without going too much into a deep rabbit hole of how that happens, suffice it to say, there's three concepts here. One, the coins, the intercoins, they're not divisible. So one coin, if you think of it as like a quarter in your hand, and it just goes and passes through one to the other. So each coin maybe has a history of like 1,000 people that have used it, right? And then it gets taken out of circulation, let's say. So that coin is not, also second concept is that coin's not watched by the entire network. Not every full node has to keep every transaction that ever happened. So the interesting thing is that coin is essentially, it's watched by a subset of the network, and there's mathematical results that show that actually the chance of a double spend goes down exponentially as you add more nodes. So you really, really get diminishing returns once you go past like 30 or 40 computers watching it. Now here's the thing. Those computers need to rotate in and out of the local consensus groups. They can't choose which coins they're going to watch. It's like if you go on Hot or Not and you vote a 10, and then you tell everybody else to vote for this person and vote for the 10, right? You shouldn't be able to do that. You should always be like watching a random person on Hot or Not, right?
Exactly.
Kind of like randomize. So the same way, to prevent collusion, you need to make sure that they can't control which coins they watch. And then, of course, the third is the biggest thing. It's an overall principle. You need true decentralization. As I alluded to with the blockchain, it's not truly decentralized if you can borrow millions of dollars and direct it, into anything at any time. You're concentrating money, power, votes, or whatever in one place. Whether it's in this case, it's the miner. It's actually an incentive for the miner to go ahead and try to mine the old block and steal the real. Let's say somebody gets a windfall of $1 million. Why mine the next block? Just mine the previous block again and try to fork the blockchain.
Right.
So there's a lot of problems with that, and so the true decentralization is when there is no central, there is no bottleneck. So I really want to dig into that. Just that's the key insight of Intercoin, is that look, if each coin is by itself and it's being watched by 30 computers or whatever, there is going to be an ambiguity. So there's 3 steps, right? First, you need to find out which group of computers is going to watch that coin. That kind of thing has already been done in BitTorrent. It's the same question of which computers are seeding this file or this chunk of this file, right? When I pull, it's something called a distributed hash table, or Kademlia. I met with the guy from NYU who invented Kademlia. It's essentially a self-rebalancing distributed hash table, and I can discuss what that is. But essentially what it does is, given a specific coin or file, it'll tell you what computers on the network are responsible for it. And here's the thing. It could sometimes be inconsistent. One person could get a set of computers that's a little off because the computers just rotated in and out. Maybe one computer lost connection or something. Mm-hmm. So the way that blockchain currently deals with it is they push all of that uncertainty into sort of like ultimate truth one way or the other, right? They basically say, look, it's either this chain or that chain, right? And it's massive. The amount of electricity being mined on each chain is massive, right? It doesn't have to be electricity. It could be proof of stake or anything. Regardless, rather than concentrating the truth in one or the other, what we do is say, look, the end user can accept the coin or not accept the coin, right? If I pay you, and you see that there's a little bit of ambiguity right now as to who the coin belongs to, you could just tell me, look, just use another coin for now. It's kind of like when you pay with a credit card and it doesn't go through, right? There's a certain point at which you say, look, I'm just going to pay with another credit card and I'm going to deal with this later, right? And the way we deal with it is that later on, the consistency comes back. Once, let's say you've got a bunch of malicious actors who just compromise the consensus locally of a coin or whatever, fine, that's no problem, because after a while, they'll be replaced by the system with other actors. And in the meantime, you just don't use the coin as much. So it's sort of the continuous, we call it green, yellow, and red, like the continuous degradation of the confidence that you have in whether the coin belongs to you it shouldn't be pushed up into the giant consensus, global consensus of everything. Rather, it should be pushed down into each individual user's decision to whether to accept this coin. And by the way, this also works for smart contracts and other general purpose computation. Is like, hey, do I accept the results of this chess game, or do I think something's been a little off, so I'm not even going to like touch it? That's the kind of difference that Intercoin has. And of course, by getting rid of the global consensus, everyone can act at the same time. There is no center, and there is no limit on how many people can use this kind of thing.
That is very fascinating. Obviously, we can tell with your background that you seem to know what you're talking about. So that is the mathematics behind that is very impressive. Obviously, this is completely different than what we're used to seeing. Are there any other projects that are comparable to Intercoin out there currently, or is this something kind of completely on its own?
Yes, we like to say that Intercoin takes some of the best ideas from the last 10 years, last 5 years. So products like, for example, MadeSafe. If you go and look up the Safe Network, they're now called. They started in 2006. They're out of Scotland. We're in touch with that team, for example. I spoke to many people at Ripple and MadeSafe and on other projects as well, some original Bitcoin developers. So if you look at MadeSafe, and Holochain is another one, they're kind of moving away from blockchain, and they're moving towards these, as I say, embarrassingly parallel systems that absolutely don't require any central authority or miner or any bottleneck at all. The other thing I do want to say about that, there's economic takeaways from this. If each coin is not divisible and you have these small coins, well, then, of course, to transfer large amounts, it's unnatural. To send billions of dollars with a $20 transaction fee is something you can do when you have a blockchain. But here, you would actually have a proportional cost, so it might be 1%. Or you might have, a free tier of like, you could do this many transactions per day, per account or whatever in the community. But the point is that it's proportional.
Transaction fee?
The transaction fees are proportional to the amount rather than,
That makes sense.
So that's a consequence of being totally distributed, because you get a feeling for it. When something's totally distributed, there's no concentration of power anywhere. And so you don't have the idea of one transaction running in the world, right, and doing flash loans. You don't have the idea of all the votes in one place where they can be leaked or stolen. And so that's the point. The point is to become truly decentralized and not just, sort of like secure. Bitcoin is secure, surely, but it's you can have mining pools and you can have all this kind of stuff.
Right. Well, I mean, we talk about it fairly frequently with specifically with Bitcoin, with the mining, like the monopoly that some of these mining pool have on Bitcoin is pretty. I mean, you could probably name 3 or 4 major mining pools that really take up 80+% of the miners out there, right? So it can absolutely be centralized.
It can absolutely be. And look, I'll give a disclaimer. I'll say that any system always tends to centralize to a point when people discover their strength in numbers, right? This is how states form. This is how commonwealths form, companies.
Unions.
And so, of course, working together is obviously, you don't waste resources fighting each other, right?
Absolutely.
And so the only thing we can ever hope for is at the highest levels that we have, 3 branches of government that are incentivized to sort of fight each other and do checks and balances. That sort of.
I didn't think
thing.
that was happening currently in the United States. I like to pick on them a lot. Obviously, being from Canada, do we still have checks and balances in the U.S.? Is that still a thing?
Oh, I don't know. Don't get me started. But that's at least that's the hope, is that the system won't get corrupted by essentially collusion between the highest concentrations of power. Right, that's really what corrupts the system is.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So obviously, we have a pre-sale going on right now, a token pre-sale for Intercoin. As of right now, there is 7 days, 8 hours, and 24 minutes remaining. Can you talk a little bit about the pre-sale?
I can guarantee you there will be less than 24 minutes after this podcast is over. Kidding.
There will, yes, there will be.
Yeah, so the pre-sale. So we are complying with all U.S. regulations. Being a U.S. company, we need to essentially we needed to deal with this, and this is a whole other layer of adoption. Right? Is what do you do? It's not as bad as people think because in the last 3 years, again, there has been a lot of disclosure by the SEC. Just like with the Jobs Act, it takes them years to do anything. But in 2019, they put out no action letters for two companies, Turnkey Jet and Pocket Full of Quarters, about utility tokens, how they're not going to recommend enforcement action. Right. There's also FinCEN and FINRA, and there's all these other state level regulators and everything. So you got to be careful with the U.S. because they're just not ready for blockchain, as many other countries have overhauled their regulations, like Switzerland and even Singapore. So what we've done is we've issued Intercoin. Intercoin is essentially a currency that it's not a currency. It is supposed to be a bridge currency between communities. So let me kind of give you an overview of what it's supposed to be, and then I can briefly touch on what the regulatory landscape is like.
Sure.
So Intercoin is supposed to be the base money, the gold of the economy of Intercoin. You can think of, like, let's say, the 19th century free banking era. Okay, mm-hmm. So banks had gold in their vaults, and then they issued banknotes, right, to their local communities. And so what are the banknotes kind of? If you wanted to go from bank to bank, you could take the gold and move it, or you could exchange banknotes on some kind of exchange. But the idea is that the banknotes are backed by the gold, and the gold is kind of represents the backing of the banknote. So there's a bit of a symbiotic relationship between them. So that's the same way. Intercoin is the base money, and then any community can buy Intercoin, from you or from whoever, buy it, and then use it to issue its own currency. So let's say you've got a festival or a university or whatever, and now people are buying tickets to your festival, or they're enrolling in your university or whatever. You may want to issue your own currency, right? So like festival bucks or university bucks. And you may want to do something like UBI. So Norman could talk about this a little bit, is that there's all these movements now, mayors for guaranteed income, Andrew Yang, all of this. That's the financial innovation that we can power. I'll get to that, but I just wanted to say this. We first need the technology to power all this. And so Intercoin is focused on community-wide applications. People are thinking right now of peer-to-peer payments with Bitcoin, and they're thinking of smart contracts and enforcement with Ethereum. But the next level is community-wide fintech applications like UBI, right? Like a consumer price index that just lets the community know, look, this is the price of food, and has been spiking in the last, week or so, and so on. Community governance with voting. And all these things are only possible if you get away from global consensus. So Intercoin is essentially saying, look, buy the tokens that are going to be bought by communities. And community it could mean anything. It could be a community of poets. It could be a project researching a drug. It could be a forum. And so these communities then issue their own currencies backed by Intercoin. And what Intercoin does, like what Norman mentioned, is when you go between communities, it seamlessly lets you just sit in Paris, look at your menu, everything's in dollars, and then go ahead and pay, and you don't have to worry about anything. Intercoin simply settles the balances between Paris and New York, periodically, let's say. Right. So that's so you go ahead to intercoin.org, you buy the base money now, and then what happens is we launch the network. And I should also mention one more thing, is that Intercoin's my second company. We have 8 million users already downloaded community applications. On my first company, we attracted 8 million users that download our apps to engage with their friends and communities. So we already have the user base, and now we're building a payment network on top of our existing social network that has, out of the 8 million, I would say about 1.5 million people have kept our apps. So we don't.
Wow.
We're not hurting for user adoption. We just
No
need
kidding.
yes.
Wow. So with Intercoin, obviously, so we have the pre-sale that's going to be ending in just over a week. What are the next steps after this is all done? What are kind of the next steps in the roadmap?
I mean, Greg, do you want to talk about like the cities and like pilot projects or?
Yeah, that's probably a good place to take it.
Sure.
There's a city in Illinois where people who are involved over there with they've collected a fund of about $10 million, and they're looking to disburse that fund in a UBI kind of way.
Okay.
In that city, the idea is reparations for people that have been affected negatively by policies in the city because the fund was collected from cannabis taxes. So they say, well, people that went to jail for drug enforcement and so on.
Sure.
They want to do kind of help them. And so here's the thing: if this was a normal UBI, as cities are now doing with the mayor of Stockton, California, and everyone wants to do a UBI. It's big resurgence right now in Spain and South Africa and other places. The way UBI is normally done is you just give the federal currency to the people, right? You kind of just give them money. And the problem with that is the city's fund gets depleted, and then they go and buy things on Amazon, on eBay, right? The stores, they pay their suppliers in other countries. And so on. Dividends are paid to shareholders. The money leaves the city, and we've seen this over and over in Detroit and other places, right? Intercoin is a very strong social impact mission, right? If you go to our forum at community.intercoin.org, you'll find a lot of people that are passionate about social impact. It's not enough to just have digital gold. Gold exists. It didn't help poor people the fact that gold exists, right? We need more than that. So we build community applications into the currency completely voluntarily, no taxation with force, but rather kind of like you accept Visa payments, because even though you lose 3% on merchant fees and whatever, it's the convenience, right? It's the network effect. So the same, excuse me, the same way that that happens, imagine if the city was able to issue its own currency. And many cities have done this already. Disney dollars. Disney is pretty much a private city, Disney World.
Yeah, no kidding.
But you've also seen casinos do it. But you also have cities like Ithaca, New York, with the Ithaca Hours, and you've got the Berkshires in Connecticut do Berkshires. I don't know if some of your listeners have heard of this. Many cities in England have done it, like Brighton pounds and Bristol pounds. So the idea is your city is in a good position, your university or whatever, to issue its own currency and to let other vendors around the area start accepting local currency. So the project is to launch your local currency first. And you can go on the website and read all about how the roadmap works. But the idea is once you've got the local currency circulating and being accepted by vendors, in the beginning they all cash it out. Just like when PayPal first came out, people would accept a PayPal payment and then they would cash it out, right? Mm-hmm. But because there is a hit that you take, maybe a 10% hit on cashing out, it's a disincentive to cash out. And so merchants are incentivized to say, you know what, employees, can we pay some of your salary in this currency, right? We'll give you like a bonus or whatever. And so the idea is that, it's just like when you told your friend, hey, would you like to be paid in Bitcoin? Or, hey, would you like to accept PayPal and create an account, right? So it creates that viral incentive to spread the currency throughout your community. And what you notice is that the currency never really leaves the community. Okay, it's kind of like going to a country where no one speaks English and speaking English, right? No one's going to understand you. Mm-hmm. So the same way, you don't take a casino chip outside of the casino and go into like another city and try to use it. The currency only works because of a local network effect. And that's really, really important, because that network effect is what gives any currency really its value. Okay, the value of a currency is only insofar as someone else will take it when it's time for me to buy something, right? So that's where inherently the value of a currency comes from, and that network effect is concentrated in that community. So what we help when we talk to Intercoin working with cities, is we talk about how can we design a way to help the city to create that currency network effect. Because when they do that, then they can print more of it, and they can democratically run their monetary policy, and then they can use the governance and the voting and the polling, random polling actually, to say, should the UBI level go up by 1% or down by 1%? And kind of it's almost like democratically governing your own money supply. And all of a sudden, even if there's a recession around you and the money supply is shrinking federally in the federation, guess what? Locally, that barber, that plumber is still going to come over and fix your leak because there's a money supply in the local area. And the other thing it does is it helps people buy local. They pay the local plumber. They pay the local landlord. They buy food that's grown locally and sourced locally. So that's another very important thing, and it helps align people's incentives with essentially the kind of things that you want to promote, which is local, less fossil fuels used, and so on. So right. That's really the social impact of our project.
That's very interesting too. I never really thought of you brought up PayPal earlier, and I've never made the connection, but you're 100% correct. Obviously, a lot of us deal with PayPal today, and once the money is in the PayPal system, I always think of it as standard currency, USD, CAD, whatever country you're in, but realistically, it is PayPal dollars. It's PayPal USD or it's PayPal CAD, because you're typically going to keep that within the same community. You're going to use it to pay for PayPal expenses, and it's very rare that I take out PayPal dollars now. It just kind of stays within the ecosystem. So that's very interesting. And you're right. Yeah, these things become these local currencies or these kind of segregated currencies.
Important, because if you ask the question of where does our money supply come from, and by money I mean the thing that you actually use when you take it out of your wallet to pay for that thing that you just bought, right? Mm-hmm. That money typically comes from a bank, a privately or publicly held corporation. It doesn't come from the U.S. government. Only about 5% of our money is printed by the Treasury and the base money. In fact, this year, fun fact, the Fed lowered the fractional reserve requirements to zero.
I'm sure it'll be fine. I'm sure that'll work out just perfectly.
I mean, I'm not an expert on monetary policy. I've been taking a crash course for 3 years, but I will say we live in interesting times. The Fed claims that it has trouble creating inflation, and they want to create some. So, it's a tough time. There's been a monetary contraction because of people losing jobs. Everything's being shaken up, and that's the kind of thing where Bitcoin started, right? The kind of environment Bitcoin started was exactly the kind of printing by the elites. So this is what I want to say: the bank underwriters decide who will get the money, which business will be a winner or a loser. If you get the loan and you get the bailout, then you're a winner. If you don't, you can go bankrupt and you're on your own. That's the current system. With a UBI, people vote with their wallet for everyday necessities, rent, food, etc. If you provide those things, that's a form of capitalism that caters to every person almost equally. There's a democratic aspect to the fact that everyone wakes up with an equal amount of money, maybe a small amount, but they're equally able to vote with their wallet for what it is that they want. And that way we can actually promote the things that people actually need, that most people actually need. So UBI could be very useful, and people don't think of it that way, but you can almost think of it as a money issuance mechanism, a democratic one,
That's very, very interesting. So we're at about the 45-minute mark here. Are there any other things we want to touch on before we move on to the next segment?
Well, I'd love to encourage everyone listening to, if you like what you hear, and this is just scratching the surface, if you want to see below the iceberg, go to intercoin.org and put in your email address. You'll join our community, and we have normally we have a show coming out that we want to talk about how these things actually work under the scenes, behind the scenes, and we also have an app coming out. So if you want to talk about DeFi and solutions that bring crypto to the masses, a mass adoption, definitely go to intercoin.org, put in your email so we can put you on the list and actually get you involved. That's all I would like to say about that.
So for those listeners, for those listeners, we're going to have the intercoin.org link in the show notes. If you listen to the past, maybe I want to say half a dozen shows, you'll see that in the notes there as well. Take a peek. Just pop your email address in and let Intercoin do the rest.
Absolutely. So yeah, I mean, there's so much out there, and Bitcoin and Ethereum, like I said, there's like the MySpace and Friendster. I think they did a great job of bringing this particular, just like social networking was a field. This is a field, right? But I think we're going to move beyond blockchain, and we're going to have so many cool solutions. And Intercoin is just one of those projects. So yeah, it's going to be a cool ride, I'll say.
That's awesome. So, okay, before we let you guys go, we always love to kind of get a little background on our guests, have a little fun. We can talk mathematics, we can talk political strategies, we can all that fun stuff. But we like to have a little fun here at the end. Our listener base knows they're going to get some information, some intelligent information, but they're going to get some shenanigans as well to go along with that. We're going to play a little rapid fire with you.
Okay. Let's
All
go.
right. So I'm just going to ask you some questions. You just answer it as quickly and as honestly as you can. So Norman, we'll start off with an easy one here. I always say it's an easy one, but it's kind of a difficult one. But what's your favorite movie?
Oh, favorite movie? That actually is kind of tough.
It is a tough question. We can break it down. We can say favorite comedy. We can say favorite horror movie.
Yeah, I gotta say The Departed, but it's the one The Departed is based on. It's if you know the movie, it's actually based on it's based on a Hong Kong flick. So
really,
that
so
original
you're
one
saying
is the one.
You're saying not The Departed, but the movie The Departed was based on.
Yes, that's the
amazing.
One.
That's a great answer.
Yeah.
Great answer. All right, Greg, I got one for you. You seem to be a worldly man. What's your favorite novel?
Ooh, my favorite novel. That's a tough one, actually. I want to say War and Peace, but I didn't finish it. So
that's a tough one. You only got through the war. You didn't finish the peace part.
Yeah, exactly. Still reading it.
All right, so we're getting close to Halloween. We're getting close to October. I am a big fan of Halloween. I'm a big fan of scary things and fun stories. Here on REKT Podcast, we always like to talk about. We're not too crazy on it, but we always like to talk about conspiracy theories and spooky stuff. Norman, do you have a favorite conspiracy theory that you kind of that kind of tickles you in a way that you kind of look into a little bit more?
Oh yeah, I would have to say it's all the Hillary Clinton conspiracy theories.
Oh, that's
there's so many. I like the one. I like the one where it's like. I like the one where people say like Benghazi was an inside job, and like she had like connections to like Saudi like arms dealers or something like that.
They are.
That's my favorite.
They are always pretty interesting. I don't follow too close, but I always thought the Hillary Hill or the Hillary kill list. I always thought that one was fairly interesting. I'm like, ooh. Yeah. Well, especially when there's like a little. You kind of look at it, you're like, maybe a little something there. I don't know. It seems to be a little. Suspicious. But I don't know about you guys. I'll make a recommendation for you guys if you're into kind of weird, anomalous stuff. Is on Amazon Prime. I've been watching these Missing 411 documentaries, and it has consumed my free time to great extents. Essentially, what it is there's these weird cases of missing people going missing in national parks across North America. A lot of them are obviously in the U.S., like Yosemite, in the Rockies, in the in the Great Smoky Mountains, that kind of thing. And it's just these weird disappearances where you'll find nothing, or they'll find the person. Like sometimes it's like kids, and they've been missing for maybe 2 days, and they're 12 miles from where they were, from where they originally lost. Perfectly fine. They have no idea what happened to them. It's very strange stuff. You've kind of taken out kidnapping. You've taken out a lot of the traditional answers, and you're really left scratching your head. So if you're into that kind of conspiracy stuff, come into this time of year. If you have Amazon Prime, I highly recommend checking out Missing 411 because it'll leave your head scratching for sure. All right, guys, we'll tie it up. We'll tie up the loose ends there. I want to give you guys another moment just to let us know where we can follow you on social media. Obviously, I believe Intercoin has its own Twitter account at.
Yeah, so we have Intercoin on LinkedIn. We have Intercoin on Twitter. We have Intercoin on Facebook, and I don't think there's any like duplicate organizations where I don't think there's like any way you can get confused. Just like type Intercoin into the search bar, and then like the one that comes up with like our logo that's the one
to follow.
Yeah.
The Telegram channel. But I would highly, highly encourage everybody just to go to intercoin.org and put in your email, because our online community using the web is the most open, most accessible community. So, if you're in the spirit of not being locked into Twitter or Facebook walled gardens, definitely come to our own forum, community.intercoin.org.
Yeah, you guys have your own self-sustaining kind of chat on the website itself, right?
Yeah. We have a forum where it's like, because typically on Twitter you can't like post things that are like too in depth.
Right.
So we made like our own community forum. You can get a little bit more. You get a little bit more meat in the content.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. So we'll encourage you guys all to check that out. Do you guys have personal Twitter accounts that we can tag for the show so that people can follow you on Twitter?
Yeah.
At Greg Mozart.
At Greg Mozart. And what about you, Norman?
I'm at Norman Chen. So Chen is spelled Qian.
Perfect. We will have those in the show notes as well. So if anybody wants to follow Greg or Norman, they can do so. Guys, I just want to say thanks very much for coming on the show. I had a blast. Super informative. Really kind of opened my eyes on the possibilities for Intercoin. It was great getting to know you guys. And until next time, don't get wrecked. And that is financial advice. Hey everybody, thanks for listening. You can help support us by giving us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and become a REKT patron by signing up for a monthly tier on patreon.com. That's patreon.com/REKT podcast. Don't get wrecked.